This is a video that I've put off for doing for a very long time. PEDs are a controversial subject, not only in bodybuilding, but in 2024, they're becoming much more modernized and popularized by the general public through the evolution of hormone clinics, the popularity of peptides, TRT, and other anti-aging performance-enhancing compounds. While this can be a great thing for men who have health issues, guys who require hormone replacement, older men who want to optimize their hormone levels, and anyone that wants to simply perform at their best. But the misinformation spread by many uneducated people on the subject has also completely blurred the lines between something as simple as TRT for health benefits to full-blown bodybuilder cycles. And everyone thinks, when it comes to building muscle and training or dieting, that there's a natural category where certain training and diet methods work if you're a natural, basically saying you have to train or eat a certain way if you're not on compounds. And then, if you're enhanced in any way, shape, or form, then now all of a sudden, the game changes. You can now literally train any way you want, you can now literally diet any way you want, and now you're still gonna build muscle and you're still gonna burn fat, all without any effort at all. First, let me say that as someone that's been around the bodybuilding world for 21 years, coached hundreds of competitors and non-competitors around the world, working with guys who are natural, working with guys that are enhanced, training guys that are on TRT and optimizing their hormones, this argument of natural versus enhanced training is completely flawed on so many levels. And I'm gonna explain exactly why. But before you rush to the comment section and you make that same useless argument, I'll write it out for you. But Pete, it's literally been proven by science. Guys that took 600 milligrams of testosterone and sat on the couch and did no training at all, they gained more muscle than natural lifters who were actually training. It's therefore been proven by science that if you take PEDs and don't even train, you're still gonna grow muscle. This is the argument that I get all the time whenever I mention natural versus enhanced training. And later in this video, I'm gonna rip this argument to shreds. But before we do that, just think about this. If it really didn't matter how you trained, if you were enhanced, why would the top Mr. Olympia competitors or anyone looking to be the best at their sport, why would they be spending hours every day training as hard as humanly possible if they could rather just take it easy and grow just as much muscle? What about the question that I often get asked? Are the training methods that you talk about for natural athletes or enhanced lifters? As if there's really a distinct difference between what grows muscle tissue as a natural competitor versus an enhanced competitor. I'm gonna break down the answer to all that in this video. But let's start by saying, there is no definitive line between naturals and enhanced that differentiates how you should be training. There's no line that you cross that says this is natural dieting and this is enhanced dieting. But rather, there's a bit of a range where, yes, things start to change a little bit. But trust me when I tell you this, that range is much bigger than you think. And things don't just dramatically change faster than you think. Now, before I jump into this, let me first say, I do not condone PED use for young guys, anyone that's uneducated about the pros and cons, anyone that chooses to use them without doctor supervision, and anything I say in this video is for education and entertainment purposes only. I'm obviously not a doctor giving medical advice. This is not any type of advice. This is just me giving you my own personal experience as a bodybuilding coach and someone who's been around the industry for 21 years. With that said, let's start by first establishing the tiers between natural and enhanced. First, you have a guy who's natural with average genetics. He doesn't have any advantages. He just has to make do with what his own genetics will allow. Now, if you step up a tier, you have next guys on TRT. Generally, these guys first off have naturally low testosterone, or there are plenty of guys who are not naturally deficient in testosterone, but they want to optimize it. So under doctor supervision, they'll supplement to bring the testosterone levels up to the higher end of the normal reference range. Now, the key word here is optimize, meaning the high end of the natural levels, not above it, not what a PED user would have. What this would look like on paper is high normal. Now, these guys could easily pass for naturals if you met them in person and just looked at them. You might not even know they're on TRT. Don't get me wrong, many of them can be in great shape and be extremely fit. But the ones who look the part are living the bodybuilding lifestyle. And the ones who aren't and are just simply on TRT for quality of life purposes can pass for an average person in the street. Next, if we move a step up, we have a category that's termed by the bodybuilding community as TRT plus. Guys who do this, generally, this is something that's not medically supervised by a doctor. But a lot of bodybuilders or guys that follow the industry are self-administering testosterone to achieve levels that are higher than the physiological range. Many guys in this category will bring those test levels up to, let's say, double what the natural limit will allow. This is where guys are strictly using them for the the performance enhancing benefits, not just quality of life. This is also the category where you'll start to also see signs of obvious PED use. Although these guys are not running typical bodybuilding cycles, their appearance is also something that many will question, is it even attainable naturally? Now, in between guys on TRT and guys on TRT plus, you have guys further optimizing their hormones with things outside of testosterone. Things like peptides, which cause your body to naturally produce higher levels of hormones, such as growth hormone and IGF. And then you have guys even supplementing with actual growth hormone on top of their testosterone. And these guys here might be using the same compounds that guys would traditionally use in TRT, but they're now purposely looking to take their levels outside of the natural range. The next tier up, you have the average gym rat that's running a bodybuilder level cycle. This generally includes testosterone at higher levels than TRT, additional anabolic compounds that are used strictly for performance enhancement. And the key here is that every category up from here, there are additional compounds added, but the major difference are the dosages. I'm not here to give you guys cycle design, obviously, but most guys here are traditionally using between 1 and 3 anabolic compounds. They're using both oral and injectable PEDs. Generally, these guys are using close to triple what guys on TRT use. This is where you start to see a clear difference in the enhanced physique, enhanced levels of muscularity, and potentially negative side effects. Talking about where you start to see the balding, the gyno, etc. Next on up, you have the serious bodybuilding competitor, or you have guys that might not even compete, but they live a very enhanced lifestyle. These guys take lots of PEDs just for the sake of getting bigger. Regardless, this is the category where you see guys starting to use a lot more compounds, maybe 3 to 4 injectables at a time. Combine that with 1 or 2 orals. Now you have things like growth hormone and insulin added into the mix. These guys, no one questions if they're natty or not. Fun fact, and I'm probably gonna piss a few people off by saying this, many guys that are in this category are also the ones that say their physique was built just on TRT. Next, the last category, you have the top of the top. This is where the mass monsters live. You have the top IFBB pros and Mr. Olympias. Again, I'm not giving out recipes here or how to be Mr. Olympia. I'm also not gonna even claim that if you took what these guys take, that you would be the next Mr. Olympia, or look anything like them for that matter. But historically, and what I've seen about guys that generally compete at this level, their dosages are generally as high in a single day that guys take in a full week in the previous tiers. Combine that with significantly higher amounts of growth hormone, and again now using insulin. You just do the math here. Now this is all just a general guideline and tiers to go off of, and I'm sure you're gonna find guys who don't fit the mold here. But just for the purposes of explaining how natural and enhanced training can differ, we're gonna use that as an example. Now I've worked with all walks of life since I've been in this industry. To this day, I get guys that come to me who are natural, guys who are on TRT, guys that are on full-blown bodybuilding cycles, and everything in between. I've worked with literally every category mentioned in this video, except for the last one. I don't have any Mr. Olympias or mass monsters on my roster. But with that being said, I can explain how my training programs differ between each individual, if at all. Let's say a guy comes to me and he's natural. Is his plan actually gonna be different than a guy who's on, let's say, TRT? Or what about the guy running full-blown bodybuilder cycles? What about if he's been training naturally for years? Now he's deciding to cross over into the dark side. Or maybe his doctor's putting him on hormone replacement therapy. Does his training really need to change? My job as a coach is to handle the training and the diet. I don't guide anyone on hormones or PEDs. That's for medical professionals. But if they come to me and they're using any of these things, they're medically supervised, I take that into account when adjusting their training variables. As of course, these variables do play a role. So finally, let's talk about how training actually differs between them. First, let's establish what builds muscle at a very basic level. If you want to build muscle during training, your goal is to create a stimulus. Rest from that stimulus, recover, grow, and then increase that stimulus over time to continue growing. Now, the harder you train in the gym, the bigger the stimulus is to a certain degree, but also the greater demand for recovery. Now, everyone at every level, natural or enhanced, they're all going to need to balance training with recovery. It's just that varying degrees between each of these levels. There's also a genetic component which is often overlooked. Now, as a natural, there are no enhancements in the mix. We have training, diet, supplements. We're limited to that individual's genetics and recovery. Now, the goal here is to create a stimulus great enough to grow, but not so great that they can't recover. Now, keep in mind, the more frequent we could create a stimulus to grow, the faster we're gonna grow and the more muscle we're gonna put on long term. So the typical bro split or one body part once per week split generally doesn't work very well for natural lifters here for that specific reason. Compare that to something like training a body part twice or even 3 times per week. Someone who trains it just once per week is generally going to have to hammer that body part, usually with a ton of volume or a ton of intensity, sometimes both, which is going to create a large enough stimulus to train it just once per week, but it's also going to dig a bigger hole into your recovery. Now, hitting that body part, let's say twice per week with less volume, that allows for better recovery between training sessions by not having to recover so much from one session. It also increases the training stimulus to multiple times per week. This results in a win-win situation, again, especially for naturals. This is also by far the most basic and straightforward approach to building muscle for anyone, and it's always going to be the foundation for every step up from here. So now let's take a walk up each step and see how training changes. Let's go from natural to true TRT or HRT. These guys are generally not using anything that the body doesn't naturally produce on its own. They're just naturally optimizing their hormone levels through chemistry. On paper, a guy on TRT will have the hormone levels of a truly gifted natural bodybuilder. However, there is plenty of nuance that goes into that. There are guys who naturally have testosterone levels of, let's say, 1,000 nanograms per deciliter, and then you have a guy on TRT with that same 1,000 nanograms per deciliter level. But the guy on TRT, even though levels are the same, still has some advantages. Due to the fact that most testosterone esters are long-acting, the guy on that TRT dose that puts him at that same 1,000 nanograms per deciliter of testosterone will have that same testosterone level 24 hours throughout the day. Regardless if he got terrible sleep, regardless if he went out, partied, drank, ate a poor diet, let's say he was sick or stressed out, that level will not budge as long as he maintains his normal TRT regimen. Now, the gifted natural with high testosterone levels naturally, he's going to have varying degrees of testosterone levels throughout the day. Generally, that 1,000 nanograms per deciliter is going to peak early in the morning and it's going to trickle off throughout the day. Now, if he has poor sleep one day, it's going to fluctuate. If he's sick, stressed, or starts following a bad diet, these are all things that are going to affect that total level and going to cause fluctuations. So there's really no true comparison between the two, even if the guys have the same level. Not to mention, total testosterone levels don't always mean the same free testosterone levels. While you might match the total testosterone level as someone who's natural on TRT, your free testosterone levels are almost always going to be higher. So keep in mind when guys say, oh, TRT is just bringing me back to my natural levels, the bottom line is there's always some advantage, at least when it comes to total and free testosterone. That's just something I wanted to throw in here because there's just so much misinformation about that argument. But the question is, does this then build more muscle as a result? And if any, how does this training differ from a natural? So let's look at what increased testosterone levels actually do. Despite going from, let's say, average testosterone levels to the high end of normal, for the vast majority of guys, this increase in testosterone within the natural range actually has very little to no impact on strength or muscle. I know. Well, many guys think that if you have a testosterone level of, let's say, 600, now you bring it up to 1,000, let's say through natural supplements or even TRT, then now all of a sudden it's going to make them jacked and super strong. I hate to break it to you, but if you really believe that an extra 100 to 200 nanograms per deciliter within the natural range is going to supercharge your results, then unfortunately, you've been duped by the marketing of natural testosterone boosting supplements. The fact is, increasing testosterone levels, again, within the normal range, has actually very little impact on strength. Some of the strongest and biggest natural bodybuilders that I know have very moderate test levels. In fact, if you go look at some of the best physiques on natural bodybuilding stages and you see their blood work, a lot of guys have like 500 nanograms per deciliter testosterone levels. Very average numbers. Not to mention at the tail end of a contest prep, a lot of them have even lower than that. But let's talk about what higher testosterone levels will actually do, especially if let's say that you're on the low end and you bring them up to the high end. Most guys with low test levels have poor recovery. A lot of it's due to increased stress. A lot of it's due to terrible sleep. Now, when these guys get their hormone levels optimized within the natural range, their mood improves, their sleep quality dramatically increases, and they're in a better overall state day to day. This as a result is going to increase their adherence to training, their diet, and as a result, this creates a better environment for recovery, especially from the increased sleep. Now, this indirectly is going to improve their recovery, and because they can recover faster, they can generally train harder each session. They're not going to be as beat up from each workout, especially as they would when they were natural, and as a result, the TRT is allowing them to get more out of what they were already doing. But it's not going to build more muscle and strength by itself with nothing else. It's simply going to create a better environment to get the most out of the basics. Let's say someone's already doing the most that they can and they're maximizing what they're doing natural. Let's say they go on TRT. provided that they weren't hypogonadal before. They're gonna see very little changes in muscle mass and strength once they're on TRT, but they're gonna see dramatic changes in other areas of their life. And any changes that they do get to their physique are gonna be from those lifestyle changes they make. Again, better sleep being one of the biggest ones. So to answer your question, how should someone who's natural and someone who's on TRT train? Is there any difference? In my opinion, the training should be virtually identical. But let's take a step up to the TRT plus category. Now we're talking about testosterone levels well above the physiological range. We're talking about guys also elevating their growth hormone levels, guys using other peptides in the mix as well. What happens here is the same thing that happens to guys on TRT, but they're using testosterone dosages that generally cause more water gain. Their ability to store more protein and glycogen increases. Their recovery ability increases a bit more. Now, the key point here is this will happen regardless if you do anything else right, unlike TRT. Now, this increased body weight from water, muscle, and glycogen, this causes an increased and noticeable impact in strength in the gym. These guys can now lift heavier, they can now create much more muscle damage as a result, and now they can create even more fatigue than they ever could have as a natural. Let's say that a natural's been training for a long time and he can squat 315 pounds for 8 reps. Now he goes on TRT plus and he can squat 405 pounds for 8 reps. That stimulus is obviously going to help him create more muscle growth over time, but he's also going to build much more fatigue each session as well. But that's okay, he's on TRT plus. His recovery is much more enhanced from what it was then when he was a natural, but the end result of this increased strength level is the benefits of the extra recovery, and the increased demand on recovery from the extra strength pretty much offsets any of the benefits due to his ability to run himself into the ground. This guy's gonna grow much more than a natural would due to all the benefits of the TRT plus. But if he thinks, okay, I'm on TRT plus, now I'm gonna train 6 or 7 days per week for 2 to 3 hours at a time, thinking that that's gonna get him even better results because he now has somehow superhuman recovery ability. He's gonna find himself, if he does that, in a position where he's just gonna hit a wall due to how hard he could train and the increased need for more recovery time. In fact, this is generally the stage where guys actually start to take a step back from their training, not forward. This is where you see guys who are maybe training 5 days per week very intensely, feel the need to cut back to 4 days per week because they said they just didn't feel like they were recovering. The number one difference here is guys at this stage, their ability to train much harder greatly increases. The natural result, more rest is needed to keep growing at that stage. So the whole idea of he's enhanced, he can train however he wants and still grow, is really just nonsense, especially at this stage. I can't tell you how many times I've had guys come to me and say, hey, I just started taking testosterone. Can we add in another day of training, or can we bump the volume or the frequency? And I tell them, no, let's not change a thing. You're literally gonna get more out of your training by changing nothing than if we were to add to it. Some of them even go off on their own for a little while and they come back later and they go, Pete, you were right. That didn't work. I actually had to cut my training down. So even at this stage, what builds muscle is literally the same thing that built muscle for you as a natural. That's why anyone with real knowledge or understanding of PEDs, they understand that they're literally the icing on the cake. You have to have the foundation of training and diet dialed in, and that'll get you great results on its own. And if you do this right, you might never even consider going on PEDs. But for anyone that does add them in, that's just gonna be to get more out of what's already working. But let's move on up to now the average gym rat cycle. I'll admit, I've seen guys do some really weird things with training in this category. Many of these guys have lots of muscle mass. They're doing weird exercises, they do a lot of pump work, and the best is many of them go to the gym without even having a real plan. See a lot of these guys just kind of winging it, yet many still build great physiques, but not all. There are plenty of guys in this category that you wouldn't even know were enhanced. And I know plenty of elite naturals that would smoke guys in this category in a bodybuilding stage. But nonetheless, there are some major differences in training in this category. But here's the thing, rather than what people think it allows you to do at this level versus what you can do as a natural, the difference is the guy that's on that gym rat bodybuilding cycle, it's what he can get away with and still make progress versus what a natural can't get away with. When you train as a natural lifter, protein synthesis spikes after a training session and it stays elevated for roughly 48 to 72 hours post-training. Basically, if you do a chest workout on Monday, you're gonna be growing from that workout till about Wednesday or Thursday the latest. After that, your pecs are just sitting around waiting. Eventually, if you wait long enough, they're gonna start to detrain a bit. And training with that low of a frequency, it generally leaves most naturals in a constant state of supercompensation and then detraining. This is why higher frequency training generally works very well for natural lifters. It keeps that protein synthesis elevated throughout the entire week. Now, guys on high level or mid-level anabolics, they're gonna have protein protein synthesis spiked around the clock. It doesn't matter if they trained a body part just once that week or 2 or 3 times. This is generally the category where you start to see the bro split working very well. It works very well because there's no need to train more frequently if the main goal is to keep protein synthesis high, as it's gonna be anyway, just simply based on the fact that these guys are on a lot of PEDs. As a result, many guys will choose to work just one body part in a single training session. It'll allow them to focus on that one body part, keeping the quality of work they do very high, and they don't have to worry about training it again until the next week. Now, many guys aren't even aware of this, and they just assume that once body part weekly frequency works great for everyone. But nonetheless, it's working great for them, so they don't question it. But don't be confused. This doesn't mean that they can train easy or not at all and still grow. The stimulus still has to be great enough to build more muscle, which is why most of these guys perform very high volumes in one session. Despite what the keyboard warriors say online, these guys still need to train hard. But what they don't need to do is they don't need to train as frequently as a natural would to maximize growth. Bottom line here, at this stage, while the basic principles still apply, and if you change nothing else about your training, you would still maximize progress. But these guys do have the luxury of being able to have similar progress and results off of lower frequencies. One thing that I want to add here is I can't tell you how many guys come to me who want to work one-on-one. We sit down, we go over their diet, their training, their goals, and I come to learn that they're already on PEDs. They give me the whole rundown, and I look at their training, and it's just very excessive. There's a lot of things that we both don't even understand why they're being done. These guys just assume because they're on gear, they should be doing it. Yet when I look at their physiques, they're not much more developed than some natural guys that I train. This is where I have to have a serious talk with them and make it clear. The reason that their results are poor, even on PEDs, is their foundation, their training, their diet, they're not solid at all. These guys are using gear as a crutch. And if they don't first dial in that foundation, the moment that they come off the gear, they're gonna deflate. This is one of the hardest things to convince guys. I personally blame social media for this. So all you see are guys glorifying PEDs or giving them all the credit for the results. How many times have you heard someone say, yeah, I'd look like that too if I were on PEDs? The sad thing is a lot of these guys actually believe it. Next on up, you have the serious bodybuilder competitor cycle. You'll see guys training with low volume here. You'll see some guys training with mega high volume. And in general, you'll see guys training in all different ways and apparently working very well for them. And this is where a lot of guys will immediately look at someone's training and say, yeah, that's not optimal. Yet, they're huge. So clearly it must be the PEDs working, right? See? Nothing else matters. But you're forgetting one very overlooked factor. One, elite genetics. What many people don't realize is that there's a ton of guys in the gym running pro bodybuilder level cycles of gear. You just have no idea because they don't look like it. I can't tell you the overwhelming amount of guys that run serious amounts of anabolics that look nowhere near pro bodybuilders' physiques. These pro bodybuilders look the way they do for 2 reasons. Yeah, the first one is the amount of gear they're on. They're not gonna get there naturally. But the other is genetics. Without those genetics, all the gear in the world is not gonna have you staying on a pro bodybuilder stage. What you're seeing is the top of the top genetics mixed with pro bodybuilder PED use. That's what you see when you look at the top bodybuilding pros today. So what does that mean when it comes to training? Most elite bodybuilding pros have one important trait in common: the ability to recover very well from intense training. This is genetic. While PEDs obviously help, there's no PED that you can take enough of that will put your recovery ability at the level of someone who has naturally great recovery who's also on PEDs. You can't out PED the recovery department. And when you have that combo, you're now gonna start to see some pretty wild training methods by guys. I know naturals who never need days off. I know naturals who can consistently handle 20+ brutal sets in the gym every day. I know naturals that can function off of 4 hours sleep and hit the gym the next day and hit a PR. As a result of these natural recovery abilities, these guys tend to train outside the mold of what most naturals can recover from. You might see them doing super high volumes or frequencies. Now, what happens if these guys take elite level bodybuilding drugs, which many of them eventually do? These are now the guys that you see at the top of the top. These are guys that already had elite genetics, and they further enhanced that by now taking PEDs. Believe it or not, the PEDs didn't change them. These guys were mutants to begin with. They've now just loaded up on anabolics and took it to the next level. Now, before we wrap this up, let me put the nail in the coffin on that whole 600 milligram of testosterone study that everyone seems to cite. In short, you had a group of guys who trained natural, and you had a group of guys who sat on the couch and didn't train at all, but they took 600 milligrams of testosterone. After a certain period of time, the group that took the testosterone actually put on more lean mass than the group that was training. The conclusion that everyone had was Look, you don't even need to train to grow on PEDs. Yes and no. What people don't understand is 600 milligrams of testosterone, that is not a small amount for the average person, especially someone who's not even training. That's gonna come with a host of side effects. One major one in this case being a ton of water retention. Your body's gonna aromatize a lot of that excess testosterone into estrogen. You're not only gonna gain more water inside the muscle cells, but under the skin, in your face, you're gonna bloat. And if you eat a crappy diet on top of that, you're gonna blow up like a water balloon. And what most people don't understand about lean mass is it's literally anything that's not fat mass. So if you're retaining a ton of water as a side effect of PED use, then yeah, you don't need to train to see an increase in lean mass from PED use. But you're also not growing more muscle tissue as a result. So what's the real truth about PEDs and bodybuilding? It's not as simple as you might think. Yeah, PEDs can help with recovery and performance, but the whole idea of them building muscle like magic just while sitting on the couch, it's not accurate. The basics still matter when it comes to building muscle. They matter a lot. Hard training, eating right, getting enough rest. That's always the foundation, whether you're natural or enhanced. And let's not forget, genetics. See those top level pro bodybuilders? That's elite genetics plus PED use. It's not just drugs. Here's the thing. There's a ton of guys out there taking serious cycles, but you'd never even know. Why? Because they don't have those elite genetics. They also don't have their diet in check, their training in check, and they're just using them as crutch. So what's the takeaway here? Focus on the fundamentals, no matter what. Optimize your training, optimize your diet, optimize your recovery. That's what's gonna get you results, no matter which path you choose. And whatever you do, make smart choices. Don't buy into the myths or the rumors that are spread online. Educate yourself, and always remember, your health matters way more than any gains you'll make. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I am gonna give you the real deal on what's going on in the industry. Take it or leave it. The choice is yours.